My name is Eleanor Northaft. My husband was in the union, Local 282. As I'm getting older, I would like somebody to fight for me. So I called up Retiree First.
Hi.
And I got Brooke.
So nice to meet you. I'm Brooke. I'm an advocate at Retiree First. I've been working with Eleanor for 3 years. She was one of my first calls. I helped her with transportation to her doctors, getting her glasses reimbursed.
Oh, they are pretty fancy.
I'm basically just answering any questions she has.
And I always have a lot of questions.
Not too many.
I have a friend there. I love it because I can depend on her to help me out in any situation.
Oh, I'm excited.
She always comes through for me.
Do you stream on a Roku, a Fire Stick, Google TV, or Apple TV? Now you can watch 6ABC 24/7 with the 6ABC Philadelphia streaming app. Watch Action News live.
And the big story on Action News.
Plus special programming, breaking news, and severe weather updates.
Tremendous amounts of rain.
Always on, always the news team you trust. Watch 6ABC 24/7 on your streaming device. Search 6ABC Philadelphia and start streaming today.
And welcome in everyone to another edition of the Labor and Energy Show with JDoc and Krausey. Glad that you're with us. Quick reminder for all of our listening audience and also for those watching this edition of the Labor and Energy Show. Remember, you can download the podcast of this program or any and all of our Labor and Energy shows. There's been some great programming done by this platform. JDoc, and I give you credit for that. Our guest list has been phenomenal. Our topics have been educational, and I think we're checking the box in terms of educating our viewers and our listeners across the Jacob Media Network.
Yeah, and a shout out to Brendan Williams of PBF Energy, who's been key in producing the show and the content for the shows over the last couple years. Today, Joe, we have a phenomenal show, okay? The issue, Virginia's requirement to become a California state and banning the sales of new gas and diesel automobiles, okay? Now, here's a question. I'm not from Virginia. What is going on in Virginia that's so relevant to the rest of us? Well, what's going on in Virginia is going on in at least 17 states and growing across the country. Including many of the states that we live in, Pennsylvania, Delaware, New Jersey, and a ton of our listener base are in states where this is happening. In 2021, under former Governor Ralph Northam, Virginia passed the legislation requiring the Commonwealth to become a California state, according to Section 177 of the Clean Air Act, okay? Now, because of this law, Virginia is required to adopt California's electric vehicle mandates, as well as California's even more recent and aggressive bans on sales of gasoline and diesel vehicles. Okay, the current governor, Glenn Youngkin, has repeatedly called for a repeal, most recently in his State of the Commonwealth address in 2024. In spite, Joe, of our sentiment, okay, and it's really important that energy should not be a political issue, not a union issue, which, you know, it's a big part of who we are, but it's a human issue, okay? But like in many states, Virginia's become a part of a partisan situation, okay, that is opposing the repeal of the California rule. So, what's really important to know is that the California EV mandate already began taking effect in January. Okay, absent to a repeal, the ban will phase in over the next few years until a full ban of sales of gasoline and diesel vehicles is reached in 2035. And today, we're going to have Virginia Delegate Tony Wilt on, who is a strong advocate to untie the Virginia from the California vehicle emissions mandate. We're going to talk to Tony. He's going to really provide some in-depth perspective to this situation, which again is affecting all of us, not just in Virginia. Okay, Virginia is a snapshot of what a lot of the country's going through, and it's expanding. But what's really interesting is the polling on this issue, which we're going to talk about in our conversation with Delegate Wilt.
Good stuff here on the Labor and Energy Show. Of course, we've covered it from the Delaware side. We've covered it from the New Jersey side. Now with Tony joining us here for the full show today on this, the Labor and Energy Show with JDoc and Krausey, we'll be able to cover it from the Virginia side. I almost wonder if the mandate and the process of initiating the mandate will never have an opportunity to even succeed, because the more I read and the more I try and understand EV vehicles as a mainstay or a replacement for the traditional vehicle, I don't even know if it's possible. I don't even know if it's realistic to expect a mandate to even happen based on where we are.
No, it's happening, okay? And we're nothing against electric vehicles, okay? They're coming into the market, so, and that's a fact, okay? But the EV mandates, you're going to find out that a lot of people don't understand them. And what's more important is the consequences of the mandate, okay? What happens if it occurs, and it is already occurring, like in Virginia, it's already happening. So, it's good conversation. People have to listen to it.
We'll pick it up on the other side. This is the Labor and Energy Show with JDoc and Krausey, back with our very special guest after this.
Welcome to Pond Lehocky, the largest workers' compensation law firm in Pennsylvania. With over 250 years of combined courtroom experience, we've helped over 100,000 injured and disabled workers obtain benefits, as well as some of the biggest settlements in the state. Even better, Pond Lehocky doesn't charge a dime until you win. If you've been injured at work, give Pond Lehocky a call.
The best way to describe Anthony, David, and Jane are that they're my brothers. I met Anthony at LA Fitness because I noticed that he had a Teamster's bag, and his dad was a Teamster leader.
I'm a third-generation son of labor. My grandmother worked in a factory. My mother and father were both Teamster members. I don't think there's a trade that I don't have a family member in.
What's so big for me coming from a union background is what affects one member affects the entire membership.
A lot of people can relate to the issues that individuals deal with. We pride ourselves on empathy.
The big value that's always instilled in you if you grow up in a union household is the importance of brotherhood. People that lean on each other, that rely on each other.
When we were building this business, having that background and knowing what matters most to the union members is really what we use to drive and build out Retiree First.
Do you stream on a Roku, Fire Stick, Google TV, or Apple TV? Now you can watch 6ABC 24/7 with the 6ABC Philadelphia streaming app.
And the big story on Action News.
Search 6ABC Philadelphia and start streaming today.
And back here on the Labor and Energy Show with JDoc and Krausey. JDoc, I'm going to ride shotgun with you on this, at least this opening segment of our interview with Tony Wilt. I just want to wrap my arms around some of the conversation that you're going to have with Tony. So I hope you don't mind me jumping in here and being a part of this first of two good segments with Tony Wilt.
Yeah, I appreciate it. And Delegate Wilt, we appreciate you being on the show. Welcome to the broadcast.
Thank you, gentlemen. I really appreciate it. The invitation. I'm honored to be here.
It's great to have you. This is a topic and a conversation we've had, on the broadcast over the last year and a half, a lot. And so want to, first of all, introduce Delegate Tony Wilt, who's representing the 34th District in Virginia's House of Delegates. If you would, sir, can you give us your take on the current state of play in Virginia and tell us a little bit more about the 2021 law requiring Virginia to become a California state, which in turn requires the Commonwealth to adopt California's electric vehicle mandates and the bans on new gasoline and diesel vehicles, and how it came about?
Well, you so aptly stated early at the top of the show, how it came about under then Governor Northam. So the mandate was enacted. It was passed, and the way the legislation was written, the way it was passed, came into law, it directly tied us to the emissions standards requirements of the state of California, and we were inherently locked into that. I would say even the following year, I've been battling this ever since it happened, and it was actually stated that, oh no, we're not. To whoever says that we were tied to California standard, they don't know what they're talking about. But it's come about full circle, here recently, that folks are realizing, yes, indeed, we're tied into the California standards, and so the current state that we're in Virginia, with as far as that legislation and where we're at. As I stated, I've carried pieces of legislation since then to try to break ties with California, and I want the listeners to understand that we had a choice. It was California standards or the EPA standards. Well, they're nothing to sneeze at either, but it gave the state a bit more flexibility. Said, here are the standards you got to meet. Now go meet them, and I think that's the far better direction for any state to go, to be, other than to be, have their processes dictated by a bunch of bureaucrats in a state clear across the country. And but where we're at today is, there was legislation introduced in the Senate, and I carried a bill on the House side. There was a couple of bills on the House side this year, but I was the main legislator to carry it. And so I presented in the subcommittee meeting. But early on, the Senate chose to do away with the Senate bill, and there was robust discussion on that and so forth. But position was made that they were going to do away with it. But I will note that one of the leading senators carrying that discussion made the comment, we probably got a problem here. And but let's put this off till after session. We'll look at it and so forth. And gee, what a better time to address it while we're here in the General Assembly. We're in session. Now's the time that we should have been looking at this. And so I presented my bill, I think last week. It all kind of runs together after a while, but presented had good discussion, and but eventually my bill was tabled as well.
So we're going to address that. And we talk about it in this so this is important. One of the things we talked about at the beginning of the broadcast, and I say it all the time, it's almost, this is the labor and energy show, okay? And which means, we touch on labor issues, and we touch on, obviously, that impact our, energy sector issues that impact our labor community, but energy's obviously on the front page every day. And so we say it shouldn't be a political issue. It shouldn't be a labor issue. It's a human issue. And so that's important because we're Democrats. We're middle of the road, common sense Democrats. Our whole conversation is about common sense in energy. So when we see what's going on and how it's impacting us, and there's such, in many cases, a lack of common sense, I ask you, sir, do our legislators, who are opposing these situations, do they really understand? Because I want to talk about the consequences of an EV mandate. Like I said, we are for electric vehicles. There are some issues, with overseas with, the mining and the critical minerals and who's doing it and stuff. We obviously, want to address, and we've been addressing. But in general, there's no denying electric vehicles are coming into the market. Happy, fantastic. But the mandates, the people understand, including our legislators, the consequences of the mandates and what they are. Let's stick with the legislators first, and then we'll get into the general public.
Yeah, that's a great question. what you're saying, it causes all of us to step back, gives us pause and say, where are they shaking out? Where are all the legislators shaking out on this issue? Because as I presented my bill, I said, I was standing there before the subcommittee, and I said, in a committee room was obviously behind me and a lot of people in attendance, and I said, everybody in this room knows what the truth is, and it's mathematical. It's an equation that cannot be solved. It's impossible because of these artificial mandates, timelines, and so forth. And it's not tenable. But back to the legislators. So I think there are some that really believe in the overall thing to do away with petrol, with fossil fuels and so forth for the cleaner environment. And I'll say, I mean, you touched on it, I'm fully all in on electric vehicles, renewable energy and something. But it has to be incremental. It has to be done in a way that it doesn't hurt our citizens. All citizens are going to pay for this negatively if it continues going in the direction that it is. And so I think some of the legislators, I don't know that they fully thought out, the logical next steps to where we're headed. Sadly, I think some of the legislators, they're more concerned that they're being driven by the folks that have their ear from the environmental folks. And I'm all for a clean environment. Hey, I breathe the air and I drink the water. I'm all for a clean environment. But they, they've made this demand on their legislators and they've bought into it. And that's disappointing because I think all legislators at the end of the day should say, yeah, I represent my constituents. I represent an idea, but I also represent all Virginians. And this is not a political, shouldn't be a political football. It's an issue that, crosses party boundaries, ideologies. It's just factual, and it has the opportunity to do great harm to our citizens.
So when you talk about that, and it's definitely something we've talked about so many times, but let's talk about some of these consequences. Okay. So there's issues with the grid. Okay. This is for our listeners. Okay. Virginia's a PJM state. Okay. Just like Pennsylvania, meaning PJM is the company that manages the state's electrical grid in concert with all the other Mid-Atlantic and Midwestern and Southern states in the group. Okay. Last year, PJM issued a report expressing major concern that the region may not have enough electricity in a few years because fossil fuel electricity generation assets are being retired at a faster pace than renewable energy additions. Okay. Given these realities, mandating EVs in the state will only require even more power, making the problem worse. Okay. How will and this is a question, Delegate, how will Virginians charge all these EVs of the EV mandates, okay, under these conditions if they're having problem keeping the lights on, okay, or have these realities and obviously the question of electricity supply in general come up in the debate and in particular over your bill?
Yeah, this and many of the other factors, you've touched on a couple, have been brought up in the debates, but it seems like it falls on deaf ears. And how's Virginia going to respond when this happens? And honestly, it's not if it happens, but when it happens. If we continue on this trajectory, California, case in point. I mean, they got the brownouts. Remember this past summer that the citizens were asked, hey, don't charge your cars. We got to have the electricity to keep us cool here during the summer. I mean, that's a reality. And you would think that we would learn from that, use that as an example to help fashion our policies going forward. But it seems to have fallen on deaf ears.
Tony, let me ask you this, just from a public perspective. Do we, or do the citizens of Virginia, is this a scenario where once they actually figure out that it's a reality, like right now, it's just a conversation. Once they figure out that it's a reality, there's this aha moment. And when that occurs, you're too late in the process.
You're spot on. That's a sad thing. And you know, we as legislators, and all that, you're educating the citizens right now, and that's a job that we try to do in the rest of the year. Is you know, look at policy and try to bring to light. You know, number one, I'm concerned about my constituents, as all legislators should be, to educate them. Here's the reality of what's happening, and sadly, I mean, you know, a lot of our citizens, they're working stiffs. They're out. I mean, they're already being hammered with inflation. Look at the cost of living that is going into, you know, that they're dealing with, and you know, that's got their attention. Man, they don't have time. This is not on the radar. They trust people like me to make the right decisions by them. And you're exactly right. They're not gonna realize the full impact to it till it's right there, till you know, and it hits them in a lot of different ways that they're going to be, reality's going to face them.
Well, and having said that, one of the things that you know, it's a trend that's, you know, shocking and actually brutal, is that we're willing to shut ourselves down, okay, and import the same resources from countries that don't have the same environmental standards that we do.
Exactly.
Okay. What's crazy about that is, you know, we're also giving up our industry in the process on a constant basis. What I'd like to say is, this is not debatable. It's not even a discussion in regards to if that's happening. It is happening. And Joe Krausey and I have been doing the Labor and Energy Show for a couple of years now, and the Labor Show for 10 years. We got into this conversation because we do a weekly labor show in the Philadelphia region. It's about labor issues and all the, well, some of our members worked at a PES refinery, and it got shut down. So we started to see kind of what's going on. Not kind of, it was almost Twilight Zone-esque. And so this entire, in the process of this the Labor and Energy Show, we've been fortunate enough to have, you know, leaders of our energy sector, our political sector, and our labor sector. And the one common denominator on every situation is the passion for the environment.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody, not one person at the highest refinery, okay, doesn't care about our environment. Everybody does. And everybody acknowledges that in the United States, we have the highest standards for emissions, okay? Not debatable. We're willing to shut ourselves down, give up our industry, okay, and let people, the ozone layer, last time I checked, covered the whole earth, okay? Yeah. And my point is, it's exactly like putting your head under the covers and pretending the bad man's not there. Okay, we're willing to give up our critical minerals to the Congo, where they have 11-year-old kids doing it, and they sell those critical minerals to a middleman who then sells them to, you know, to our corporations over here, like we don't know that's going on. Okay, so in our permitting situation over here, 10 years to get a permit to mine critical minerals and do it the right way. It's happening anyway. We're just allowing what's going on overseas to crush us. Now, I do want to just touch on, you know, we talk about the consequences. Okay, you're taking the choice out of the public's hands regarding purchasing vehicles. Okay, you know, we don't have the projected infrastructure, like we talked about the grid, to support the mandates as related to the EV charging stations. Okay, so major issue with the grid, costing jobs and to American people, good paying union jobs. Okay, the refineries who refine the fuels for the gas powered cars will close. The jobs will go with them. They will not reopen. Okay, and let's not forget the EVs are currently unaffordable to regular people. Okay, and so there's so many issues, and we can continue to go on. But are these conversations, Delegate Wilt, that, I mean, these are not really, I'm not saying they're not debatable, but just as a conversation piece, what, are our legislators talking about these issues and more?
Joe, I would say yes, probably to a person. It's just been it depends on how they're talking about it. Some of us are more public with it than others, and I gotta believe that those that have been pushing the EV at all costs narrative, behind the scenes, they're having the same conversation. As I stated earlier, one or two of the senators that helped, they got rid of the Senate legislation, but they admitted, we got a problem here, and we're going to have to address. I guarantee you, they're having those same conversations and probably, trying to figure out, how do we fix this? How do we get out from under? And it's like you said earlier. I'll touch on in a I'm sure we'll have some other things discussed too. But just on the practical part of generation, we pride ourselves, and here in the state of Virginia, we're patting ourselves on the back. We're getting rid of fossil energy generation and so forth. We've lessened generating capacity roughly 10%. But in the same time, without the EV mandate. I laid my cell phone back here on my desk, so it didn't bother us. But our demands continue to rise, and then you throw this mandate in on top of it. The demand's going to be exponential, and so now you're going back to the grid and so forth. Number one, grid reliability, but just the fact is there going to be enough electricity, and it's falling back on electricity that's generated by those very things that we pride ourselves on getting rid of. So just how much do we really pat ourselves on the back? As you said, where it's generated, how many days later is that same pollution over top us? It's like a dog chasing its tail.
Well, it's interesting because we only got a minute to this break, but our conversation is consistently about working together for the solutions.
Sure.
Okay. We see what's going on. Obviously, the trends. It's shutting down our jobs. We cannot help but to see it. Okay. And then you look at the bigger picture, like we're doing. And one of the things that we've noticed is, obviously, this complete lack of trust that from the environmental left that our energy sector, a traditional energy sector, will work together with them. Let me tell you something. They've done a great job at getting everybody's attention, beating the crap out of everything that moves. Okay. People want to work together now. I don't know how it was at the beginning. Okay. Maybe the energy sector, traditional energy sector, thought we were untouchable. That is not the way it is. Okay. Maybe it wasn't that way. But the bottom line is, okay, everybody's willing to come to the table, do whatever it takes to create a plan here. Okay. That is, I think, a goal that one of the things we talk about on the show is let's work together, come up with some common sense solutions, okay, and do this in the right way so we don't risk our grid and all of our jobs and all those other things that, by the way, I have a saying: you can do what you want, but you cannot avoid the consequences. Okay, why do we have to tell the little kid that not to touch the stove and the fire on the stove, till he does and burns his hand? It's incredibly frustrating and, more importantly, confusing. Joe Kraus?
Tony Wilt, Virginia House of Delegates, 34th District, is our special guest here today on the Labor and Energy Show. We'll take a 60-second break. Back with more in a moment.
My name is Eleanor Northaft. My husband was in the union, Local 282. And as I'm getting older, I'd like somebody to fight for me. So I called up Retiree First. Hi. And I got Brooke.
So nice to meet you. I'm Brooke. I'm an advocate at Retiree First. I've been working with Eleanor for 3 years. She was one of my first calls. I helped her with transportation to her doctors, getting her glasses reimbursed.
Oh, they are pretty fancy.
I'm basically just answering any questions she has.
And I always have a lot of questions.
Not too many.
I have a friend there. I love it because I can depend on her to help me out in any situation.
Oh, I'm excited.
She always comes through for me.
Do you stream on a Roku, a Fire Stick, Google TV, or Apple TV? Now you can watch 6ABC 24/7 with the 6ABC Philadelphia streaming app. Watch Action News live.
And the big story on Action News.
Plus special programming, breaking news, and severe weather updates.
Tremendous amounts of rain.
Always on, always the news team you trust. Watch 6ABC 24/7 on your streaming device. Search 6ABC Philadelphia and start streaming today.
And back here on the Labor and Energy Show with JDoc and Krausey. Again, if you miss any of today's broadcast or if you'd like to re-listen to the good conversation we're having today, go to Apple or Spotify if that's where you consume your podcast. Search the word search the show rather, Labor and Energy Show, and you can download the podcast.
So, we're talking about the California rule and how it's impacting Virginia. And this conversation is relevant to 17 states, okay, across the country. Everybody should be watching it, okay? Let's look at some other consequences, okay? Automakers are losing thousands on every EV they make, okay? Number one, China owns the majority of the supply chain regarding the manufacturing of EVs, okay? Critical minerals, like I touched on, for EV batteries are being mined in the Congo using child labor. Okay. And, the bottom line is in many cases, the general public has no idea what EV mandates are. Okay. They, hear electric vehicles, everybody wants to get one, or who can afford them wants to get one, and fantastic. Having said that, we're in the middle of a discussion with Delegate Tony Wilt, representing Virginia's 34th district in the House of Delegates. And, Delegate Wilt, let's talk about, Joe Kraus touched on the general public, okay? Let's talk about the recent polling, okay? And we've had Stephen Hankin on, who, it does polling, okay? And his company does polling. And there's been a number of polls that show most Virginians, okay, have no idea that they're even aligned with the California's vehicle mandate. Okay, when they're informed, they're not supportive of the law. Okay, nearly 60% of Virginians believe the General Assembly should repeal the 2021 law. Okay, that imposes the California new car mandates. Talk about that. Okay, and the fact that most people, this isn't just in Virginia, but we're talking about Virginia, don't have an awareness, and when they find out, they don't support the mandates.
No, you're spot on. I mean, the data shows, as we talked about earlier, a lot of our citizens. I mean, they're just trying to get by, trying to make a living, trying to take care of their families. They're not engaged to the level that we would. This is near and dear to you and to me. So we're kind of got an inside track. But again, our citizens count on you. They count on me to help educate them and make the right decisions that are going to take care of them to a degree. They want to take care of themselves, but they want a level playing field. And this type of legislation does not create a level playing field.
Well, it's interesting because Joe Kraus will say, it's this show. One of the benefits that we have on this broadcast is we weren't in the energy sector. Okay, we did not have a lot of education. We're both what you would call, dinner table environmentalists. Like a lot of people, we all care about the environment. Okay, Joe will say during the broadcast, I'm getting educated like the rest of the listeners. We got impacted because of a situation in Philly and, got turned upside down on it and literally, totally we're in shock, about the whole situation. Okay, and so when you look at what's going on, it impacts so many people. One of the things, first of all, do you think, especially when, obviously upcoming elections, do you think that this situation it will impact, the upcoming elections?
Possibly. And the reason I say possibly, that's, I'm not very good at looking forward and seeing how elections are going to go. But I'm thinking that, we talked earlier about other legislators and where they're shaking out on this issue. And I would bet that there's some of them that's looking at it, if not from a practical standpoint, from a political standpoint. How is this gonna impact them and their political races? Now, we also have to understand here in Virginia, we have a bit of a divide, like a lot of states. We've got our urban crescent, and then the rest of us are rural. Okay, and there is a divide, and they do happen to line up politically. By and large, the urban areas are more Democrat, the rural areas are Republican. But just from all things urban, it's a different world. I mean, they look at public transportation is a lot more prevalent there. They don't understand a rural perspective, and so they look at these things, and I would dare say probably a lot of their constituents is, oh, hey, we've got all these amenities that are available to us. So we should apply this, whatever standard, whatever you want to talk about legislative. We see it a lot, and there's a real disconnect between those two segments of our state, and that's part of the problem.
So the legislation was passed in a manner that was bypassed originally bypassed the Administrative Process Act. Can you expand on what the APA is and why it's so important, and speak to the ramifications of not following that?
Yeah, well, yeah, you're exactly right. I mean, there is a process that we're to follow, through legislation, be it introduced and being enacted and so forth. And you're right, it did not go through that whole legislation went through, kind of in the dark of the night, if you will, and didn't get a full legal process. And so, yeah, that's how it came about. And, I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but I think there was probably some intent there, if I'd be so bold to make it go like that, because I think if it would have been more in the daylight, so to speak, I think at that time there would have been a public backlash to it.
Yeah, and it leads to the question, at least in my eyes, why in the middle of the night, if it's so, in other words, if we want people to be educated on the issue, and so why not follow the standard process? But let's talk about the auto manufacturers, okay, and the auto dealers. Have they weighed in on this, on any of the repeal bills, in this session or previous sessions?
They're very cautious about weighing in, and I don't know. I can't speak for them, but I think there is a likelihood that they're worried about backlash, more legislative backlash, that they could, if they speak out and really voice their concerns that they have. I think they're afraid. Wow, then who knows what's going to come next? What are they going to do? And I'm glad you brought that up, because it's kind of at the heart of this whole thing. I mean, you've touched on some great points. Where the rare minerals, the grid, and stuff. I mean, man, I got pages and pages of talking points on all those things. But at the very heart of this is consumer driven, right? And when consumers, this is something new. And as you said, let the free market dictate this, drive it. We're seeing more and more EVs all the time, but consumers have to be comfortable with this whatever this technology or whatever it is. And when they see stories like a couple of weeks ago, the charging station in Illinois that was the charging station was froze up, and so were the cars. And so that does not give anyone the warm fuzzies, right? It says, hey, wait a minute. This is what they know, that there's not the charging infrastructure. No, take away the issue of the grid capability, just the infrastructure to charge all this potential number of vehicles. And I think some legislators think that this is, these goals, which is aspirational. We're going to set this and we're going to make it happen. But as you point, that there is a distinct and real penalty that can be levied on our manufacturers, and they've got to know that. So let's ask ourselves, why are the manufacturers? Why do they exist? What are they? I mean, they exist to make vehicles, and they're pretty darn good at measuring the public and knowing what consumer interests are, consumer likes, dislikes. They've been doing it a while, right? And they know that this is not, we're seeing the demand level flatten out, and in some instances it's waning, and they're in the business to make vehicles that we, number one, we need, and it supports their industry. It supports those jobs that you talked about. And so what happens if we don't meet this, if we don't meet these goals, that penalty can fall back on the manufacturer. So what happens if I'm a manufacturer? To meet that ratio, I'm not going to put ICE vehicles into Virginia so I can keep my ratio. So I can meet that 35% ratio. Well, what does that do with consumer choice? It takes it away, to a large degree, and it drives up the cost. Let's switch over just for a second to the used vehicle market. So the new vehicle market goes in that direction. Naturally, the new market goes that direction. The used market's going to follow. It's going to, but at the end of the day, it's going to starve out our consumers. And I've told people, I'm the 34th. You mentioned the 34th, where I'm at. I'm up in the Shenandoah Valley, western part of the state. Let's look at the state geographically. Up my way, when people can't find a vehicle, they're going to go to West Virginia. That's
exactly.
Yeah.
Let me jump on that.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
So we had Jim Appleton on from New Jersey Car, okay, and they represent the auto dealers, okay, and he's the president of New Jersey Coalition of Automotive Retailers, and people, you're taking their choice away, but not really. They're just going to go to another state that's not in the California rule, and they're going to buy their gas fueled cars and diesel fueled cars, and so, so there are consequences that impact a lot of different areas, okay, and obviously the auto dealers. When you talk about the manufacturers, they lose so much money on each EV. Okay, they're willing to, obviously they're cautious because of that. And, as a citizen, whatever, I don't have to worry about an EV not being built, and however it gets built, I'm talking about to the regular, citizen, they're going to be able to find one. However, there are massive consequences to a lot of citizens and workers across the country and businesses. So, that's a great point. If they can't get it in Virginia, they're going to go to the nearest state where they can get it, and they're going to buy it. And so it's a great question, or it's a great point that you make there. And when you talk about that, and with your fellow policymakers, what is the response?
No, there's not much acknowledgement. It depends on which side of the issue you're on. It's those that are so ingrained in moving forward with where we're at. It seems like it falls on deaf ears. There doesn't seem to be an acknowledgement that these are real problems. And Joe, when we're talking about that, we did some rough figure. Okay, please, everyone understand this. This is not scientific, but following through on that natural progression, this could have a couple $1 billion hit to the economy of Virginia. I mean, who's going to backfill that? And so those are some of the realities. And we talk about the manufacturers. We see what GM's doing. We see what Ford's doing. I mean, they're pulling back from their manufacturing again, because they see that it's not. I think it was, what's the company in Italy that has RAM and all that? Back a years ago, they said, we're not even going to sell to states that have adopted this. We're going to go to where we can sell our vehicles. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, I mean, those are the ramifications we have to realize. I mean, that's the reality. So, yeah.
Tony, the fallout is monumental. Every action creates a reaction. The fallout, I would argue, from a common sense perspective, is so much greater than the benefit of an EV mandate. It's a lopsided equation. As I look at it, as I listen, that's what I see.
Before Tony responds, one thing people have to understand in the process of not being educated on this situation, so that we can because our point is not to shut down electric vehicles. It's to work, get both sides working together for a common sense solution here. However, one of the things that people must understand is that the decisions and the legislation that is driving all this is happening right now. Yes. Right now, that are going to, the mandates may not be supposed to be full, but the mandates are not going to be in full effect till, for example, 2035. But the legislation's happening now, and the impacts are starting now as well. So in the process of not understanding the actual, we're in the California, we're in their emissions rule and their environmental rule. These impacts are happening now. Okay?
Yeah, and my point in that, in asking Tony that, was if the state of Virginia potentially is going to lose $1 billion in revenue from the mandate, that loss needs to be absorbed somewhere. It just doesn't. It just doesn't go away, Tony.
Yeah, no, you're exactly right. You're. And see, if nothing happens in a vacuum, if we thought that, well, okay, all we're going to do is hammer the manufacturers, and they're the big folks that they make all the money and so forth. I totally disagree with that. But if that was your mindset, but we've got to realize, I mean, we're all in this thing together. Look at all the ancillary industries and businesses that rely on that one. That's a hub. The manufacturing's up. What about the tire folks? What about? I mean, just start down your list as long as your arm. Those are all the other businesses that's gonna fall prey to this as well, because somebody thinks it's just going to be this one little industry that's going to get hurt, and they can afford it.
So we only have a few minutes left. I want to spit fire. Okay, the California rule. Okay, and opting into that, okay, back in 2021. Okay, in order to impact these EV mandates, I mean, they fall, in line with the California rule, which a lot of people don't even know in Virginia and around in the 17 states that have opted in, that they're in it. Okay, is there anything being done legislatively? I know your bill. And your legislation approach, but is there any opportunity that the current governor, okay, can do something about this? Number one, and number two, is there any legislation or anything going on to increase infrastructure in the charging stations, okay, that, will charge the electric vehicles to avoid what just happened across the country where they all froze. Can you touch on them? We got a minute. We only have a minute. I'm sorry.
Sure. Yeah. So our government. So we're back to politics. Both of our legislative bodies are Democrat controlled. They have the majorities in the House and Senate. Republican governor. I mean, and I know that this is a priority of our governor, but without the help of the legislature, I'm afraid we're going to continue down the same path we're on.
What can with 20 seconds left? What can the general public do who are now learning about this issue?
Contact their legislators. Contact them. Demand to get a fix. I'm not saying do completely away with it, but work together, cross the aisle to come up with you've said it the whole program. Work together for a viable solution. I believe it's there.
Tony, we can't thank you enough for being on the program. And certainly we'll have you back on. Hopefully we're going to make, this people are listening and we're going to be able to impact this issue because it's leading us down a one-way street and we need to work together. Joe Kraus.
Perception and reality. Reality ultimately shows up at your doorstep. Tony Wilt, thank you so much for being a part of the Labor and Energy Show. We'll get to a commercial break. JDoc and I will wrap it up on the other side.
Thank you.
Welcome to Pond Lehocky, the largest workers' compensation law firm in Pennsylvania. With over 250 years of combined courtroom experience, we've helped over 100,000 injured and disabled workers obtain benefits, as well as some of the biggest settlements in the state. Even better, Pond Lehocky doesn't charge a dime until you win. If you've been injured at work, give Pond Lehocky a call.
The best way to describe Anthony, David, and Jane that they're my brothers. I met Anthony at LA Fitness because I noticed that he had a Teamster's bag and his dad was a Teamster leader.
I'm a third generation son of labor. My grandmother worked in a factory. My mother and father were both Teamster members. I don't think there's a trade that I don't have a family member in.
What's so big for me coming from a union background is what affects one member affects the entire membership.
A lot of people can relate to the issues that individuals deal with. We pride ourselves on empathy.
The big value that's always instilled in you if you grow up in a union household is the importance of brotherhood. People that lean on each other, that rely on each other.
When we were building this business, having that background and knowing what matters most to the union members is really what we use to drive and build out Retiree First.
Do you stream on a Roku, Fire Stick, Google TV, or Apple TV? Now you can watch 6ABC 24/7 with the 6ABC Philadelphia streaming app.
And the big story on Action News.
Search 6ABC Philadelphia and start streaming today.
And back here on the Labor and Energy Show, just a couple of minutes, JDoc. I'll give most of the time to you just to put a wrap on it. But in listening to our conversation today and in being part of the conversation with Tony, I think it comes down to the reality of let the public, the market, and capitalism determine who wants to buy an EV and who wants to buy a gasoline vehicle.
Listen,
a mandate is not feasible.
Well,
that's my opinion.
Well, no, listen, I get it, but they're happening, and
they're happening, which is fine, but it's not. But I still have a choice. I still have an option. I want a choice.
And in some states, okay, like the ones we're talking about, the 17 states that are involved in, that have opted in to California's emissions environmental policy, they don't have an option. If Delegate Wilt said, and so it's important that we educate ourselves, that our voices be heard, okay, and that ultimately we're not trying to shut this down. We're passionate about the environment, but we got to work together on solutions, Joe. That's really the key right there. When did, like John Bland said so long ago when we started this, former business manager of the Boilermakers Union, Local 13 in Philadelphia, when did we stop working together? Okay? Common sense and energy. It's almost, and again, we talk about it, like being in the twilight zone, man. We're writing checks that we're not going to be able to cash without a lot of pain, and we're going to just end up backtracking. And a lot of the impact and the mess that this is going to create when it comes to fruition, it's going to be impossible to untangle. So, we hope people are listening and we can all, get to our senses and work together.
That's going to do it for this edition of the Labor and Energy Show with JDoc and Krausey. We thank everybody for tuning in or watching. Don't forget, you can download this edition of the Labor and Energy Show on Apple or Spotify. Just search Labor and Energy. Great stuff today, JDoc. We'll see everybody next week.
My name is Eleanor Northaft. My husband was in the union, Local 282. And as I'm getting older, I'd like somebody to fight for me. So I called up Retiree First.
Hi.
And I got Brooke.
So nice to meet you.
I'm Brooke. I'm an advocate at Retiree First. I've been working with Eleanor for 3 years. She was one of my first calls. I helped her with transportation to her doctors, getting her glasses reimbursed.
Oh, they are pretty fancy.
I'm basically just answering any questions she has.
And I always have a lot of questions.
Not too many.
I have a friend there. I love it because I can depend on her to help me out in any situation.
Oh, I'm excited.
She always comes through for me.
Do you stream on a Roku, a Fire Stick, Google TV, or Apple TV? Now you can watch 6ABC 24/7 with the 6ABC Philadelphia streaming app. Watch Action News live.
And the big story on Action News.
Plus special programming, breaking news, and severe weather updates.
Tremendous amounts of rain.
Always on, always the news team you trust. Watch 6ABC 24/7 on your streaming device. Search 6ABC Philadelphia and start streaming today.